Welcome, everybody, back to the Soulganize Your Life podcast. And I noticed that the more that I am soulganizing my own life, the more I'm enjoying being a human. And the outer circumstances of life are always dinging us in two different ways. As a psychotherapist, I recognize one way as through the separate psychological ego, and the other way is through our divine soul connection to all that is. So, why is it important to know the difference? Well, that's where our guests come in because they're going to help us relate to this inner conflict that they themselves experience and then now work with other people to help integrate these two perspectives into one full, beautiful, crazy human experience. And today, Tatiana Franklin is here, and we surprisingly have such similar journeys. We both started out really going deep with IPEC, which is the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, which I cannot recommend enough for anybody to dive into if they ever have the time and the resources. And then after becoming coaches, we both realized that we're more than coaches. And that took us into a little bit different direction. And today she's going to very specifically talk about a topic I'm completely unfamiliar with. And I'm going to let her introduce it so I don't mess it up. So thank you, Tatiana, for being here, and jump right in.
Thank you, Wynn. Thank you so much for having me here. So where I started with Pranic Healing was actually closely connected to my journey as a certified coach. Once I had achieved the certification for myself, I started attending all these different events that spoke to me.
Yeah.
And so one of those events was a Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within.
Yes.
Yeah, and so when I attended this event, which I went fully open without any expectations, anything like that, and so I went, and it was an amazing event. And on the last day of that event, Master Stephen Co, who's now my teacher, came on stage, and he engaged everyone, which at the time was about like 12,000 people in
Yeah.
person. Um, yeah, it's amazing. Through this meditation called the Meditation of the Twin Hearts, which is a staple meditation of Pranic Healing. And at the time, I had no idea what Pranic Healing was. I didn't even know how to spell it. Had zero knowledge about what it was. But I, alongside with everyone else, did the meditation, and I had the most incredible aha moment because at that moment I realized, wow, I can actually create this deep level of stillness for myself. And I can honestly tell you that's one of the most important moments for me when I got in touch with my higher soul.
Yes.
It was a really really important and changing moment for me. And so after the event, I was immediately curious about what pranic healing is, and I signed up right away to learn what it is. And that was back in 2018. So from 2018 to now, I've been focusing on learning, on getting my certifications through pranic healing, combining pranic healing with coaching, developing my intuition, all these wonderful things that come from that. So just to let you and everyone else knows who might be listening, what pranic healing is about. It is an advanced form of energy healing
Hmm.
that relies on two main parts, so to speak. So the first part, I, as a pranic healer, come in and I start the scanning process, meaning, so we all have different chakras alongside in our bodies, aligned with our spine. And so what I do first is I scan, meaning I measure each and all of the major chakras in your body to detect whether there's an excess of energy that needs to be cleansed, or whether the chakra has so little energy that is depleted and it actually needs to be energized. So
Okay.
yeah, after I do that part, which is the scanning, the assessment, then I use protocols And in Pranic Healing, there is a myriad of protocols. Protocols are like energy recipes, if you would.
Hmm.
So let's say, for example, that you have chronic migraines. So there's a specific protocol for that, that tells me, okay, work with these chakras where um, mostly the congestion is found that results in the body experiencing the migraines. Use this amount of energy. Use these different colors of energy for different purposes. So it's very methodical.
Hmm.
And so the first part is the assessment. The second part is the cleansing and energizing of the chakras, and this is why it's considered an advanced form of energy healing, because it's very methodical, it's very focused. It has been widely tested and researched,
Hmm.
and there's several books on the topic.
Awesome. Well, I love when you're talking about chakras because in IPEC, where we both got trained, that was the first time I was introduced to the idea that we have 7 levels of energy or 7 chakras or 7 nodes, whatever you want to call it. Their model was very practical and talked about our thoughts and beliefs and emotions, but you're taking it sort of, to the next level. And so seamlessly, like you're saying, learn like, okay, so now that I've identified the different levels of maybe suffering or pain, I can be very specific about how I do that with you without having to necessarily talk about it.
Right.
Which, as a psychotherapist, I say to people all the time, right? We can talk and process about maybe what happened, but ultimately, the energy work that's being done on the planet now is body focused. It
Right.
really, we need to get up and out the things that we're talking about
Yeah.
through other means than talking. And so I love what you're doing and how you could probably apply that to some of the coaching that you did through the different levels, right? I can talk to you about what I'm seeing in your chakra that corresponds to the coaching techniques that I learned. So you sound really like a one-stop shop in a way. And I love that. So what was life like before you had that moment? When you said I did a twin heart meditation, I immediately, because I always think of ego and soul, I'm wondering, was it the ego and the soul meditation, or was it something different? How did you become aware of all that? Kind of walk us through that journey.
Yeah, sure. So before that, I had actually spent quite some time in the advertising world. Um,
Okay.
yep, I was working for an advertising agency. So I was in the communications field for some time, and I had reached this point, and this was just prior to me realizing that I wanted to get my coaching certification. So what got me to that point was that I had gotten into this repetitive pattern of waking
Mhm.
up, going to work,
Yeah.
working excessively for 50 hours a week, coming back, eating dinner, going to bed, waking up,
Yeah.
and then rinsing and repeating endlessly.
Yeah.
And so at some point,
Before, can I stop you there for a second? Because I always like to clarify the ego, right? And so, what about you? What did you learn? What was conditioned in your mind that you thought that was the right thing to do to be successful? How did your ego develop into an ad executive who worked 50 hours a
right,
week?
right. So I personally view the beginning, the seedings of the ego, if you would.
Hmm.
Uh, for me, they go back to how you grew up,
Yep.
how you were raised, the values that you were taught, the
Yep.
beliefs that you were given, all those things, right?
Yep.
So all those things create this mini world of a variety of labels. And so I grew up with a specific set, just like you and everyone else, of this mini world of labels.
Yep.
And so part of my labels in my mini world where, work hard and, there's really no time for vacation, just adjust to very specific sets of rules. And so, from growing up in that environment into adulthood, I went the traditional way of, going to college, getting a master's degree, getting out there, getting a job, right? And so, at that time, before my first awakening, I would say, I was conditioned to, this is the life that you live. You find a
Yeah.
job, you do your job, you go home, and then you do it all over again.
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and to add to that, the clients that I was working with at the time, they had that exact same pattern.
Yeah.
The pattern of let's make money, new
Yes.
product, make more money, new product, make more money, on and
Yeah.
on and on and on. And so at some point, I was like, this isn't real life. This is just, you know, this is just capitalism. This is just a bunch of unreal things.
Mhm.
Where is happiness? Where is purpose?
Yes.
Where is time with family? Where are all these things that are really more important than
What
just
great
making money?
questions. Where is purpose? Where is happiness? And where is family time? Like, yep, those are just three basic questions everyone could start with. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I had already been thinking in the back of my mind about these very important questions. And so there was a very specific moment in time when I was at work. I was in this call with the client, and they were going through the regular, checkups and checks and balances, so to speak. Where is this project? When are we launching the next thing? And I was just sitting there, just looking at everybody and just thinking, that's it. Like, I cannot do this for another year of my life. I have to find out what it is that I actually want to do. Like,
Nice.
like what I said, what's my purpose, right? What am I here to do?
Yeah.
And
So at
so
that, so at that time of your life, were you spiritual, or did you have a sense of your soul at any capacity?
I did grow up Catholic, and I was very spiritual, but not to the point where I am now.
Yes.
And so after I was in the setting of realizing, where am I going, I had to do a soul searching, so to speak, where I'm like, okay, let's really think about what I want to do. And so I ended up finding life coaching, which at the time, again, I already had, a degree, a master's degree. So what is this life coaching about?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it was even mocked at the time.
Yes, for sure.
But I found it, and I started reading about what it really was. I immediately became interested. I went through the training process, the certification process, and I absolutely loved it. It allowed me to heal. It allowed me to develop awareness. It allowed me to really connect, to my higher soul, and it also allowed me to let go of all these labels of
Yeah.
transcend the ego, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's how I came about that.
Yeah. And so, as I similarly understood theoretically, intellectually, right? We understood something. But then you had this moment at Tony Robbins where you embodied what you intellectually knew. And that's when the stuff changes. And that's what I want all psychotherapists to think about when they're talking to their clients is you can talk all day about this stuff and intellectually understand things, but there needs to be an embodiment of some sort. And a lot of people hopefully don't have to go through some suffering to do that, but rather something like you experience, which is an awakening in the body, not the mind per se.
Right.
And then you have room to go. And that's where you went. Right. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, tell us how that changed your life from there. I mean, I'm sure it must have been weird to tell people.
It was a process. I mean, much of the important things that had happened in my life have been a process.
Yeah.
And so from getting my certification, from attending Tony Robbins, meeting Master Stephen Coe, knowing what Pranic Healing is, and saying yes to, blindly to this new training that was in front of me.
Yeah.
Um, it was a process of, Pranic Healing is very inviting. The trainings are very easy. The books are very easy to understand. So it was like literally, down to the basic process of learning. Just like we learn in coaching the different levels of energy, it was learning, the properties of the different applications of prana. What it is, how the chakras even work. Why
Mhm.
does this all work anyway? And just learning to apply it. And it was interesting because for me, the first time that I actually decided to, okay, I'm gonna start offering this as a service. I'm actually gonna start getting paid for Pranic
Yeah.
Healing, was right after the pandemic, uh,
Mm.
because all my work had already been remote because of coaching, right? Um, but I was like, okay, the world needs something else,
Yeah.
and so that's something else for me, was to start offering pranic healing sessions.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
and
it was
I love what you just said, because that is the shift from the ego to the soul. Is what do I want? What do I need? What are my preferences? Is the ego. And then there's a soul opening where we say, what does the world need? What gifts could I open up in myself that the world actually needs, not what I maybe think is going to make me a fast buck. And that really is beautiful, the way you switched that wording just now to talk about, right? Like when you were talking about your ego is very self-focused, which everyone has. And then it was like, wait a second. Okay, the world just went through a pandemic. There's quiet quitting, great resignation. People are done on so many levels with this old way of thinking, this egoic system of thinking. And that means some of us have to step into a brand new way that maybe looks a little bizarre, but be open to it.
mhm.
Right? Just anybody who's listening, be open to the fact that this might actually change your life to go visit someone like you, right? And she can relate. Tatiana can relate. So I love that. So sorry, keep going. I just like to
Yeah.
point out the difference when I can.
No, I love it. So yeah, it definitely starts with that curiosity, because at some point I was also curious about, okay, what if I start offering these sessions? What's going to happen?
Mm,
And so I did. And obviously they were remote, just as a coaching. And a very interesting thing happened when I started offering these sessions, which is something that had never happened to me before. I mean, I would always call myself someone who is intuitive, who comes from a line of women who have always used their intuition. But when I started giving these sessions to clients, um, as I was, cleansing the chakras and energizing them, I started receiving messages
mhm.
from their loved ones who had passed, or maybe their guides, which, this is available to everyone, right?
Yes.
And I started, conveying these messages. I was hesitant at the beginning because I was like, "What is this?" you
Yeah.
know, I didn't know that I had access to this, right? Um, and but I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna share it because there was a reason why this was entrusted to me,
Mhm.
and I'm sure the reason is not for me to keep it. And so I started sharing. Hesitantly at the beginning. I was like, okay, I don't know how this is gonna come out, but and I started sharing these messages, and they were, very well received. They resonated, and so I just started, trusting in myself more and more in that capacity, and sharing more and more. And yeah, so that it all started with that openness that you mentioned, with that curiosity of trying something new. And yeah, now it is part of my sessions now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say the soul, the way I define it is the divine connection to all that is. And so, as you stated, as I got more involved in meditating and intuition, I was also receiving messages, and it felt very like, wow, you're really intruding on someone when you just blurt, something out. But then once you start doing it, you're like, oh, that person was almost always happy to hear it, or it always made sense to them. And so, if we can just recognize that we aren't just an ego, and that we are a soul, and that we are literally divinely connected, then it makes logical sense to me now that you could be somewhere else on the planet working with someone across the screen. And just by deciding to energetically connect to them, which is an intention, right? Which we have to do
Mhm.
and work on, that you can do those things. You can clean them. You can energize them, you can repair, you can offer messages, and then that person, gets to take away that and think, is this something that I want to start diving into myself? And that's how we create the new earth, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And so, yeah. And so who at this point do you have as ideal clients, or who are your favorite people to work with? Or, how would you describe your current practice?
So I've centered not only my practice but my training, everything that I do for myself as a business person, centers around three keywords.
Mm,
Um, the first word for me is heal,
yeah.
uh, because to change anything, to enter anything new, to achieve any objective that you want to achieve,
Mm-hmm.
or any direction that you want to go, you first have to heal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you might not necessarily have to heal as much as the next person or as little as the next person. That is a very personal and unique process. Um, but there is always something to heal, whether it's something that originated when you were little, something that happened later on in life, or
Mm-hmm.
just a limiting belief that you acquire for whatever reason, right? The second keyword for me is to move on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you have healed whatever it is that is within your past, whether it was recent past or many many years ago that you needed to heal, then you are in the best position to move on. You can move on mentally, emotionally, physically, and definitely energetically.
Yes.
And after you have healed and you have moved on, then you are in a position, and that comes to the third word that defines my practice and what I do is to lead.
Okay.
um, yeah, I love to help people create awareness and realize the kind of self leaders that they can be.
Mm-hmm.
Because we, at the end of the day, we're all leaders in our own capacities.
For sure.
It just depends on the kind of leader that you are, right? And so I help people figure that out for themselves and then apply that to their lives, to their goals, to whatever it is that they want to do in the next chapter of their life.
Awesome. So if we go back to the first word, heal,
Mhm.
what is your definition of heal?
So heal for me is mending. Is not necessarily saying, oh, this never happened,
Yeah.
or because it did, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily going back to the whole conversation about ego. It's not necessarily adding negative labels to that, uh,
Mm-hmm.
or not necessarily something that you use to perpetuate this idea that you might have that you could be a victim of a situation, which yeah, I mean, bad things happen, but you don't necessarily have to let whatever happened define your present or your future. And so to me, healing is in a way detaching from those labels,
Mm-hmm.
understanding what happened, and allowing yourself to let go of it, because a lot of heal involves forgiveness of many kinds, either forgiveness to other people, forgiveness of what happened, forgiveness, even self forgiveness. Maybe you made a decision that you later on regretted, or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. So forgiveness also involves forgiving yourself. So there's many layers to healing, but I think a good start is to start with forgiveness, to start with understanding what happened, because that can be very healing.
Yeah.
um, yeah, and also understanding who you are now, even though you went through whatever it is that you went through. Who are you now, and what allowed you to be here, right? What are those sets of variables that allow you to get to where you are now, and that whole process can be very healing.
Yeah. I love that. And I go to a Reiki master, and she and I were talking about that my clients will often say they're damaged, right? And they think, oh, I'm just learning how to cope and tolerate with the damage rather than healing, which to your point is like a mending back. She talks about it as bringing your energy back that was lost. So you're just retrieving something that you unknowingly or unconsciously gave away, through this experience. Maybe it was trauma, maybe it was a bad breakup, but maybe it was, a teacher not being nice, like whatever it is, you give this level of energy away and you're just retrieving it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so psychologically, I think that's, to your point, it's, in therapy, it's when I'm no longer emotionally charged when I think about the experience. And so, again, that's all great to talk about in therapy, but we really do need these other professionals like yourself and my Reiki master who can just come in and take the garbage out or reformulate it or whatever needs to happen. And it really is a team effort. So, and again, from your standpoint, it sounds like you can also coach them through that, right? Through some really wonderful, powerful questions, which I know I also learned at IPEC. So that, once you are healed, I get why that's first, because you can't move on from an identity that you think is damaged, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or is not mendable. And then once that's mended, you move on. And then that gives you the ability to lead. And like you said, we're all leading, whether we're conscious of it or not. And so when you become conscious of it, life is so much more fun, right? And I would call that soulganizing, right? Where you're enjoying being a human again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So is there a particular type of person that you like to work with, or if someone was, looking for someone like you?
Yeah. So I don't like to say, for example, oh, I only work with let's say women in their 20s, for example.
Yeah.
I go more for the need rather than, what the person is or what they look like, in those terms. So someone who definitely is looking, to really create change, that lasts. Someone who maybe has tried some conventional ways of dealing with this, or maybe, has just avoided, any other therapies. And but they acknowledge that there has to be a change, that they do need to heal. They just don't know where or how to start.
Yeah.
When I combine the coaching and the healing, it is a beautiful experience because, as you know, the coaching works at the mental level,
Yeah.
and the emotional as well. And the healing works at the energetic level. So it's not, they're very complementing. And
Yes.
so, it's kind of like when you decide to, let's say that you want to build muscle in your body. Obviously, the obvious answer would be to, oh, I'm going to start, going to the gym and lifting weights, right?
Yeah.
But alongside with that, you could also look into, food that has protein, or, taking some supplements, or,
Yeah.
many other things, right? And so
Yeah.
I love how complementing the coaching and the healing is. One doesn't really cancel the other. It is quite the opposite. Um, so going back to your question, anyone who is really ready for change, they just don't know how to approach it, but they're open enough to, to try it out.
Awesome. And can be anywhere because it's remote. So
That's right.
yeah. So how do people find you if they want to come and check you out?
You can go to my website, which is www.tatianafranklin.com. And from there, you can send me an email. You can look at all my services. You can even book a session. You can also buy crystals if that's what you're into.
Oh, awesome. And just for 1 minute, talk a little bit about the crystals.
Yeah, so the crystals are a love and a passion that I've had since I was little.
Hmm.
I've always been a big fan of crystals. And in learning Pranic Healing, we actually do support our sessions with specific crystal tools.
Hmm.
And so, again, going back to this whole period of expansion during, right after the pandemic, I thought, well, I love crystals anyway, and I work with them in my sessions. So why not look into what it takes to start selling them?
Nice.
And so I started this business called Citrine Prana from zero. I had zero knowledge of what it is to be someone who sells crystals. So I learned everything about it. I created a website for it. And so I'm always, looking to create new relationships with crystal sellers throughout the world. I mean, I already have working relationships with different sellers in India and Brazil. And so I pick everything myself. I cleanse everything myself energetically. Um, I'm a one woman business, so everything that you see on my websites, I have touched from beginning to end. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, I'm even the same person who packs everything and goes to the post office to send them off. So it's a very rewarding side of what I do, and I love it.
Yeah, it sounds like such love and care you take with each part of the business, and that's hopefully what your clients would feel as well. Yeah, so thank you so much for being on and for talking through this. And I hope you have an awesome rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Wen. You too.